I'm charging my laser. This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
How do you find your tabletop RPG news?
Ben, I am the news.
Rascal, a new tabletop RPG news website.
Something that is kind of reporting with integrity.
Wizards of the Coast have decided that they will no longer be translating their books into Portuguese.
It's really more of an economic issue than a role-playing game issue.
Candela Obscura is getting its 4th season.
It's what you think every time. Every time you're like, this time it's going to be real.
Dragon Friends is starting a new season soon with its new GMs, Tom Cardy and Eden Lacey.
I'm a huge Dragon Friends fan. Dragon Friends is the reason I actually got into D&D.
All that and more right now, baby!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 source of tabletop RPG news. If you like your news reheated, that's right, you don't want that fresh spaghetti. You want to pop it in the microwave at least a day or two later and warm it up because fresh news is too hot. This is the Old News podcast for your tabletop RPG sources. My name is Ben Byrne. I am joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and stepping in for James Hake this week, welcome back to the Lorecast, Luna Lou Boffin. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Luna, I've got a question for you, which is, how do you find your tabletop RPG news?
With a deep feeling of horror in my soul, it is Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's the only place I get news and stay on top of things, even though I know Twitter is not great for me and I shouldn't be on it.
No, we're all slaves to the Roman Empire of
yes.
Although now it's like the Eastern Roman Empire, not the Western Roman Empire, because I don't know which sides are where. Anyway,
this is
Dael
getting
Kingsmill.
too in depth.
The analogy's getting away from me.
How many times a day do you think about the Roman Empire, Ben?
Oh, I did not even realize that was a thing when my wife asked me, and I was like, look, at least once a week, like genuinely. I'm not even like, and in fact, when she asked me that question, I was like, I can not only just give you an estimate of how often I think about the Roman Empire, I can tell you the last time I thought about the Roman Empire and the exact reason why I was thinking about the Roman Empire. But that is neither here nor there. Dael Kingsmill, where do you get your tabletop RPG news from?
I get my tabletop RPG news from this podcast. I find out every week when Ben sends me a run sheet and I go, what's happening? And I Google it.
Okay, good.
So, you're in good hands, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Awesome. That's good to know. Shawn Merwin, what about your fine self?
Ben, I am the news. I know the news before the news even happens.
That was such a boss answer.
It's generally wrong, but I know it. No, I mean, when you're in the sort of freelance, not in the industry, but sort of on the edges of the industry, and you talk with people, there have been so many times when something's been reported and I know it's absolutely false and it's being accepted by everyone as the God's honest truth. And since I'm under NDA or I would be betraying a confidence, I just have to sit there and nod my head. And so it's, where do I get the news? I get the news from the same place everyone else does, everywhere. And that means that sometimes you are on the cutting edge and you know exactly what's happening. And sometimes you are 2 months behind and you have no clue what's happening. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who report the news are in the exact same boat that we are. So that's okay.
Mastering Dungeons. Often I listen to that after the fact and I'm like, how did they know about it? Where did they learn about that? That would have been great for the Lorecast run sheet. It's a shame that we record on the same day because I would love to know where you'd get your breaking news. But I guess now I know. Speaking of news, let's dive in because there is a new source of tabletop RPG news that has arrived on the scene. Rascal is a new... Rascal? I don't know if that's an Australianism. I have two ways that I pronounce that. You'd say Rascal, Dael? What would you say? Rascal. Okay. Well, let's go Rascal. Rascal is a new tabletop
Rascal
news...
feels too castle for me.
Yeah, I think that's the distinction.
Rascal in a castle.
Nevertheless, that is also the name of a new tabletop RPG news website, which has been recently founded by Lynn Kodega, Rowan Zioli, and Chase Carter, three luminaries within the gaming media landscape, having come from previous websites such as I'm going to get the name of this wrong. Is it IO9? Dicebreaker, I believe, which is websites that I've used in the past. And this is kind of cool. Has anybody checked out Rascal? Either of them?
I went to the site. I gave it a look. It looks like there are some interesting articles there. It is behind a paywall, or some of them are. So you will need to get a subscription if you want to read the whole thing. I really hope it works out and that it does become, a journalistic integritized. Is it? What's the word I'm looking for where you have integrity? I hope it reports with integrity and doesn't turn into because it needs more revenue. Like, can you believe how WotC ruined D&D again? That sort of thing. But if anything, we've learned over the last few years, that's what sells. And so if that's the way it goes, it won't surprise me. I just hope it doesn't.
I signed up for the paid membership. Yeah, just because I had the same feeling of like, yeah, I would love to see something that is kind of reporting with integrity. And I think, especially given the whole OGL stuff, which does, it was quite a while now, but like I remember just so many, people who are not reporters jumping into the mix and being like, here's what's happening. And, I think people sometimes, or YouTubers especially, I mean, I'm a YouTuber, so I feel like I can say this, but like forget that like, journalists have degrees. Like it's a trained, specialized field, and just sort of repeating what you've heard is not journalism. It can and it can lead to a lot of problems, which it did. Like there was a lot of misinformation and misreporting that was quite harmful in a lot of ways. So I'm the same. I'm optimistic. I hope it's going to be good. And Lincoln Egger was, of course, the person who sort of broke the news with a journalistic article about the OGL. So
yeah. It is like citizen journalism has its place. Absolutely. Yes. I'm never going to knock citizen journalism, except for right now when I agree with what Luna said. I think it's just nice as well to have people who, to at least some extent, know what they're doing the thing that they know how to do. I just love, creator-owned, worker-owned initiatives like this. And it's the sort of thing that, you have to fund in some way. So I don't begrudge them putting it behind a paywall. It is going to be interesting to see how they try to balance the sort of come to me debate of like, come and join us, come and pay our subscription, because you do need something to draw people in order to build up the good faith to get people to subscribe to a paid service like that. But potentially, by the sounds of things, could be a worthwhile thing for people to support. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
It's important to remember too that even trained professional journalists with 20 years experience are sometimes bad at what they do.
That's true.
The people who I've dealt with over the years who have been interviewed by real newspapers and real journalists who are misquoted, who are misrepresented, it's a high number. The percentage is way up there. So even those trained people have a hard time always getting it right. So if you don't have that training, it just tends to be even harder to hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I am interested by their business model. I think it's great having something that is kind of, as you said, Dael, worker owned, but how they lure people in to want to engage with their work at the moment, it's kind of based on this promise of, authentic reporting and real journalism and inquiring rather than just kind of trying to grab onto the most clickbaitable stuff and throw it on a YouTube channel to draw views. I think this kind of behind a paywall kind of business model that they've gone for, I don't know whether that de-incentivizes kind of rage baiting or it incentivizes rage baiting.
Because they're not based on clicks, so it's not about sensationalizing and getting the highest number of clicks, but you do still have to do something that makes people want to take that leap and hey. I like that we've been calling it lore and bait. It makes it sound so sinister. But I don't know if it necessarily is sinister.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. I think
I'm not a journalist.
So far, this is a net positive because, the more currently for folks' interest, where I tend to source a lot of the information is generally reading a couple of different articles on the same subject. So I've got a couple of different perspectives. And it's usually from places like comicbook.com, Dicebreaker, I think it's wargamer.com, EN World, I tend to use a lot. And so having another source like that, I think is really positive because I tend not to go to YouTube channels for news and information for reasons that we have discussed in the past. So yeah, net positive. I'll be interested to see how this goes and the sort of articles that they start to do because
Michael
I think
in chat is pointing out as well. There's not really that different from journalists on Patreon, which is true.
Sure, that's true. Yeah, I think the difference is when I think of, we have a couple of Australia-centric news reporting, and this is not in the tabletop RPG space. This is I'm thinking of Michael West Media, Friendly Geordies, who, if you're not in Australia, you might not know who these people are, at least not the first one, who are Patreon backed, but their videos, for the most part, are still free to watch. What's interesting to me about Rascal is that it's almost completely paywalled unless it's something that's been contributed by the community, like saying hey, this product is launching or whatever, from what I've seen on their website so far. So that, to me, how they're going to find that balance in terms of ensuring that the public have access to information, which they're not entitled to necessarily. People aren't entitled to journalists' work for the sake of it, but just saying there's maybe a balance there to be struck. I don't know. I'll be interested to see how it develops.
I feel like maybe what they'll do is once they have enough of a base, they'll probably will release some articles publicly because I feel like that's the only way you're going to get people in,
And I will be interested to see, I think what you'll see a lot more on there is those kind of editorial or deep dive stories, kind of like what Morris did last week on Evil Genius Games, that kind of unfold an entire topic rather than just regurgitating the talking points at you after giving you a bunch of SEO lead in, that's Dungeons and Dragons did another thing with their 5th edition community convention, Gen Con, just as many SEO in the first 2 paragraphs as possible and then get to the actual nut of the information. Speaking of the proliferation of information, unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast has chosen not to proliferate the information of how to play their game in the language that is Portuguese.
Oh, I see where we're going. Okay.
Yeah, we're changing topic. Which is sad news. To put that in more plain speech, Wizards of the Coast have decided that they will no longer be translating their books into Portuguese, which is a shame because it comes less than 2 years after Wizards of the Coast kind of proudly announced that they would be translating their books into various different languages, including Portuguese. And they are citing largely that it's a difficult decision due to the rising costs and shifts in global demand, which I think in plain speak is, folks in Brazil predominantly were not able to create enough market demand for it to be worth Wizards' investment.
I'm a little surprised that they only cut Portuguese if they were going to cut, different language versions of the books.
Sure.
I maybe would have expected to see Japanese cut as well, just because there's a similar. I know that the culture of tabletop RPGs in Japan is just so vastly different from a lot of Western cultures and their relationship with tabletop RPGs. So I don't know. I'm a little surprised that it's only Portuguese. I'm sad for the Brazilian fans. Yeah.
It's really more of an economic issue than a role-playing game issue. A $70 book in Brazil is 350 Brazilian real. And if your average monthly salary is $8,000 or 8,000 real, there you go. And that's not anything. Wizards can't change the economy of, South America, unfortunately. And they're having troubles of their own, which is why we're seeing the book still being translated into places where the economic whatever you want to call it, balance would still allow people to buy the product.
I wonder which of these kind of markets in terms of translations are growing markets as opposed to, I don't know this, but like, is it because Japan has a very different RPG culture, but my understanding is they have a relatively strong RPG culture.
Definitely strong. It's just that, so my understanding of it, and, it's been a while since I read about this, but my understanding of it is that, in particular, Japan came to sort of traditional tabletop RPGs after video games, whereas in the West it was like tabletop RPGs, then video games took after tabletop RPGs, and now they're kind of influencing each other. In Japan, it very much is video games have influenced tabletop RPGs, and then on top of that, the space available to like someone's private home doesn't tend to be big enough to have like 6 of your friends come over and you play for hours on end, right? So instead, a lot of the time, tabletop RPGs tend to be played in public spaces, and they tend to be based around, one session. We're going to get together at this place and we're going to play this game, and it will be done at the end, right? It's like a one-shot kind of culture as far as my understanding goes, whereas D&D pushes for the, long-term campaign.
I don't know how to end that, so we're just going to
do a segue
do
boy.
a segue. All right.
Do it in Portuguese.
Yeah.
I'm going to be real honest. I do not speak any of these other languages except for the tiniest bit of French.
I thought you were going to say the tiniest bit of English.
Sick burn.
Got him. Speaking of getting things, Candela Obscura is getting its 4th season, starting on the anniversary of the live stream of Candela Obscura, with a new live play. Luna, have you been keeping up with Candela Obscura specifically? I'm not assuming you have been.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I haven't actually. And I think it's just because I find it hard when I'm already trying to keep up with. So for people who are watching who don't know, I make a lot of content about Critical Role. So I try and keep up with the main show every week. It's like 5 hours a week. Plus, I often have to watch bits multiple times if I'm making a video or if I'm doing a stream on a particular topic. So yeah, it's just a lot to keep on top of. Plus, on top of that, the horror genre is definitely not my favorite. I'm a scaredy cat. And especially body horror, which some of the seasons have included. So yeah, for that reason too, I haven't really been keeping up with it. I keep meaning to. I watched the first 2 seasons, first 2 chapters. And I thought the second chapter was incredible. It was really amazing watching Spencer, who's one of the writers of the game, GM, because obviously, he knows the system back to front. So that was really fun to see it played. In that way, and it was a great season. So, but yeah, I haven't kept up with. I didn't watch Abria's season, unfortunately, not yet. But maybe at some point. It's just hard. It's too much to listen and watch, and so many great shows out there.
No, absolutely. And live plays are such a demand on time, as you've said, that, even I think I've said before, season 2 of Critical Role, I was like, all right, I'm in from the beginning this time. I'm going to keep up with it. And by episode 3 or 4, I was already hours behind.
It's what you think every time. Every time you're like, this time it's going to be real. And then, I don't know, you have one doctor's appointment at the wrong time one week, or a class changes time. Suddenly you're out of the loop. You don't know what's going on and you can't catch up. But I actually think that that's a big factor. I don't think it's just Lunar. I think, you look at the numbers of a lot of Critical Role one-shots or their sort of side series rather than the main campaign that they do. And the numbers don't show up until later. They do show up. People do go back and watch those things eventually, but it's just a factor of if there's a week where Critical Role Live is doing a one-shot instead of the main campaign, I think a lot of people use that time to catch up on an episode of the main campaign if they're behind. I think that you tend to see kind of a delay in the numbers for their shows other than the main campaign. But even then, the numbers are still big. These are still very, very successful live play shows. And particularly with the Candela Obscura seasons, because they're pumping them out pretty dang quick. And they're only 3-episode little arcs. So people can, when they have a little gap, when they have the opportunity, they can go back and watch them and catch up. And the production quality is still just so high. So it's,
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume that they're doing pretty well to justify the production quality, because Candela Obscura just looks amazing. It's full costume, full set. It's no longer, you think about back in the Geek and Sundry days when it was kind of like, some bookshelves in the background, kind of like
the
this, and it looks
always
nice.
A question mark.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas these are, or virtually, they could, the only thing that they could do to change it, to make it more like, like an actual scripted TV, is to just move the tables. Just take the tables out of it and have them fully LARPing it, and you'd basically be watching TV at that point, or scripted television.
I mean, keep in mind as well that this is the strongest ad campaign they have. It's an ad that they don't have to pay any more for, really, than they would ordinarily be paying, right? This is money generating content that is also marketing for their game that is generating money. So it's just a smart decision as well.
Is the marketing for the game making more money than the game?
Yeah, it's a very good point.
That's the $1 million question that's out there. Is making role playing games is not the way to make $1 million or whatever, right? It's not the way to make a living. It's not. There are more people probably making money doing actual plays than there are people making money making role playing game books. And so I'm like, it seems like putting the cart before the horse, or just getting rid of the cart and just ride the horse.
It's diversifying. They're diversifying their income, Shawn.
It's an investment portfolio. I see. Thank you, Dael.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder too how much of it is. It feels like, a lot of the energy and like passion is going to Candela. Not to say that they're not investing that in their main campaign, but like Candela, the production value is massive. And I wonder if it's just kind of, you get to a point where they're like making a lot of money off of their main campaign, and they're like, well, I want to make this cool, weird horror show that maybe not that many people are going to watch, but I got the money. Like, so maybe they're just kind of, at some point, I think as a creative, you need to branch out to keep things interesting for yourself. And I've always wondered about how long Critical Role is going to keep going with the same cast and the same format. I mean, I think eventually people are going to burn out. It's been 10 years now. So I think, maybe part of it is just like, even if this doesn't make much money, like, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's also a great way of feeding into the audience. Here's a bunch of other people. Look at all these other people who are sometimes our cast.
Don't you like these people? Aren't they great? Wouldn't it be great to see more of them?
What if they, exactly. So that they have a little bit more of that wiggle room to bring people in and out as the main cast probably desires. It has been a long time.
Yeah. I've always maintained that I think, campaign 4, or maybe not to campaign 5, but like we're going to see a cast shake up, because I just don't think they can sustain it for forever.
Sure.
Completely agree.
Yeah. But anyway.
This, in chat, someone named ZS Dante, I have no idea who that might be, said, weirdly, the game could be understood as a type of merch.
Yep. I'm pretty sure a lot of critics don't know who haven't played it.
It's the most expensive merch you're ever going to make to get, right? Making a role-playing game book is like not like making a T-shirt or a pin or something like that, right? It's hugely time-consuming and expensive. And so, yes, I guess that is true.
Well, that's fine. They just why make an RPG book when you can just use someone else's RPG book? Blades in the Dark. I kid.
We got to get out of here. The snipers are coming.
No, I do kid, because genuinely I want to try playing Candela Obscura. I almost did at one point grab that quick play kind of thing they had up on their website for a while. And just it never materialized, never happened. I think we had the whole group together, so we played our regular campaign.
I enjoyed it. I've had to say this every single time. I've never played Blades in the Dark, so I'm not a good person to like weigh in on that front. But as far as the game, it's funny. I read the rules for it, and I was like, I don't know. Some of this sounds but in actual practice, I had a good time with the system. It was fun. I only played it the once, but no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed how the rolling of the dice felt. And the book is pretty and has pretty pictures in it. So that's my review.
The artwork is very nice.
Yeah, the book is gorgeous.
It's not. Yeah. It's not sort of overly produced, that artwork that they marketed, I think, the book with initially of the lady with her skin falling off or something. That's not like it's a very expressionistic piece that I quite like, it's not overly done. I have a question for you, Luna. You might not know the answer to it, and that's fine if you don't, but I am curious.
We only kind of a couple of honesty.
Things. Yeah, exactly. Which is, where's Daggerheart? Like, where is it? I assume maybe later this year.
I don't think it's due until 2025.
Oh, really?
You're expecting a very quick turnaround on Daggerheart, Ben.
I'm pretty sure it's not due for quite a while. This always gets me in trouble, but I'm of the opinion that they're going to launch it at the same time as they launch the next campaign, which will probably use it as their system. But that's just my opinion. I could totally be wrong.
I completely agree.
But why does that get you in trouble?
I don't understand why they would
every
spend,
time you have
as
a
Shawn
theory,
says.
I'm like, yes.
But, as Shawn says, it takes a lot of time and money and like paying people and playtesting and, to make a game. Why make a game that they've specifically said is designed for long-term campaigns and then not use it for their famous long-term campaign show? So, so I wonder if they're going to try and release it at the same time or release it after the next campaign starts so that people see it in action a little bit. But I'm sure they probably want to see if it's received well before they totally hedge their bets on changing from D&D.
But because the show is the main source of marketing, the best marketing they can get. It's, what it is? It's that the tabletop RPG industry and the tabletop RPG entertainment industry are two different things. Mm-hmm. It's a little symbiotic creature, but they are different things.
Or is releasing the RPG marketing for the live play.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Right, yeah, okay. I didn't realize it was so far away, and it's maybe because they released Candela Obscura so quickly after that live play kind of happened that I was expecting Daggerheart. Oh, whoa, that was almost a slip of the tongue. I was expecting Daggerheart a little bit sooner. Here's my follow-up question, which is, I agree with you. I assumed that they would also start their next campaign with Daggerheart as their system. I don't know why that opinion would get you in trouble. I'm kind of intrigued by that. But my actual question is, Daggerheart appears to have not only it self-contained specific rules, but also species and kind of, player options that seem specific to a world setting that is not D&D.
Yes.
From some of the cards I've seen.
From what I can tell
that was my question. Was it Exandria?
Well, I must admit, I haven't kept up a lot with Daggerheart stuff. I know Bob Worldbuilder has did a lot of playtests and has put out some really great videos and interviewed the designers and stuff, but I haven't got around to watching them. But it's from what I can see, just from the stuff that I've seen briefly, it doesn't seem to be Exandria, which is really curious to me because I don't think they're done with Exandria yet. I wonder if the game will come with a setting and then there'll be like an Exandria supplement or something,
Right.
Well, Exandria is in 5th edition, like they have multiple Exandrian books in 5th edition now, so
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to intersect.
There is a tension there between, which I'm thinking about right now as we kind of go into the next design phase of Grimhollow, which is the system is not the world. The system is a set of tools for constructing the world, which means that what is left, of the system, what you don't use doesn't necessarily exist in the world. Right? If you're constructing your campaign in a specific way. And yet, the system informs the world so much that it can feel incongruous to have the wrong system for the wrong world, so to speak. Which is why when I was seeing the alternative species in Daggerheart, I was like, it looks like from a design perspective, from a game design perspective, and from a creative perspective, you want a reason for Daggerheart to exist. And a reason for it to separate itself from 5th edition D&D. If it's doing the same Tolkien-esque elves, dwarves, halflings, gnomes, orcs, if it's doing that same thing, which Daggerheart doesn't appear to be doing as a way to potentially differentiate itself more from 5e worlds. But if it's not Exandria, anyway, I'm just kind of pontificating, to be honest, at the moment. But did
you listen to the Mastering Dungeons recording that we did a few hours ago? Because We talked about world building and systems, and you just summed up everything that we talked about in like
Oh, really?
2.5 minutes. So
No.
you don't need to listen to Mastering Dungeons this week. You could just listen to that.
Well, I'm glad. I didn't, but these thoughts were coming because I was watching a video. I can't remember the name of the YouTuber at the moment, so I slightly apologize to this person. But their video was about how you can't do low magic in 5e for various reasons, and I disagree with some of their reasons, and I think they've also got some very good points. But it made me, in fact, I asked this in the Lorecast chat a couple of weeks ago, which was, is the system the world, or is the world, or does the system inform the world? Because there's a lot of like, try this in your 5th edition game to have it make it take a more dark fantasy bent. And the reply is, well, that doesn't work because this exists in the system. And it's like, well, don't use that in the system. It doesn't, just because this spell exists in the rule book doesn't mean it has to exist somewhere in the world of the game if the GM hasn't kind of introduced it in, or if the players haven't asked for it.
So it's cyberculture again. It's phenomenology again, right? It's you are phenomenologically experiencing the game world, but your method of doing that, cyborg style, is via these dice mechanics and these rules that you agree to abide by.
Sure.
And the thing is that you can rearrange them. Like, I got in so much trouble from so many people when I made that video saying, yeah, you could do 80s teen horror in D&D. I haven't written any new rules. I've just rearranged and chosen what rules to include. And there you go. It feels like 80s slasher horror instead of high fantasy. So yes, basically I agree with what Ben is saying.
Yeah, I should go watch that video actually, because I've got a similar one coming up. But anyway, I digress. Let us move on. Speaking of live plays, Andy has sent in a question, a long-time listener. Andy has sent in a question, and this is kind of news/listener email, which is that Dragon Friends, an Australian actual play podcast, is starting a new season soon with its new GMs, the recently thrust on the tabletop RPG stage, world stage, Tom Cardy, and Eden Lacey, who is a Dragon Friends regular. For folks that don't recognize that name immediately, you almost certainly will when I say that Tom Cardy was the musician who did that D&D themed song, like, I want to say a month or two ago, that I got sent like 7 times, and I'm sure you all did too, about 3 party members on the road. They come across a short foe, fireballs are cast, regrets were had. Is that a good enough explanation of what I'm talking about here?
I mean, you might also know him from such classic hits as "Have You Checked Your Butthole?"
Right, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you get it.
I get it. I'm a huge Dragon Friends fan. Dragon Friends is the reason I actually got into D&D. It was the very first podcast I ever listened to before I'd played, or D&D podcast I listened to before I played. And I was like, because the whole premise in the first season is it's a bunch of comedians who literally have never played D&D, have no idea how to play it. And then the only people who know are the 2, because they have 2 dungeon masters. And I listened to it and I was like, wow, like it was so dumb and silly. And I was like, D&D is not as serious as I thought it was going to be. Like, and
it's
it really
actually fun.
Made me super excited. Yeah. So I'm a huge Dragon Friends fan. I've sort of fell behind quite a few seasons, but I'm slowly trying to catch back up again. But yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it to everyone. It has a lot of Australian swearing is the only warning I give. It has an Australian level of swearing.
Australian swearing. Okay.
Australian swearing.
Gotcha.
I'm curious to know whether, I mean, maybe someone here knows or someone in chat knows whether this means Dave Harmon will be playing in the next season, or whether it means that he's taken a break. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't heard.
Yes, they've put out an overly long, by their own admittance, intro trailer that demonstrates why none of the other cast can take on the GMing roles this season. So I would guess that he will be a player and avoid the stress of the GMing role, but I don't know. I think
he's just had another kid though, so he could be taking a break. I know a lot of the cast have been having babies recently, so
that is just like our generation problem that we're going through right now, is that all our friends have started having babies, and that is a beautiful, wonderful, amazing thing that kills D&D campaigns.
No, I love having a friend with a baby at the D&D table when they're like, is it okay if I bring the baby? I'm like, that, for me, as a DM, that brings my stress level way down.
Oh,
because
really?
if there's a cat on the table, if there's a baby who's hungry, it always makes things just like such an easy vibe for me, because it's like, oh, great, everything's already chaos.
Right.
So no one's going to notice if I stuff up. It genuinely, deeply, my friend Kit, if you're out, you're not listening to this, but if you are, thank you so much for bringing your baby to D&D.
My kid is just getting old enough to start playing. He's 7, and so we don't really play D&D, but we sort of play D&D light. And he's not very good at taking turns yet. You know, he's still learning about, like, it's not about winning, it's about working together as a team. It's a fun little challenge, and kids are so fun to play with. Like, sorry, side tangent, because they just go off in just the weirdest directions, which is very fun.
Tom Cardy and Eden Lacey taking over GMing of Dragon Friends, bringing us into Nick's question. I'm going to throw you under the bus slightly here, Luna. If people want to email this podcast, do you know the email address that people would send to?
Is it podcast@ghostfireofficial.com?
Oh, you're so close. You're so close. You definitely get a B+ on that one.
Okay,
it is podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Oh, yeah, of course, because Ghostfire Official is the Twitch handle. yeah.
Is the Twitch, yeah. We tried to get Ghostfire Gaming. I think somebody else already had it. I can't
yes,
remember.
because
Anyway.
I have shouted out Ghostfire Gaming on Twitch many times and then realized it was not you guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been like, I'm going to be on Ghostfire Gaming. Here's the channel. And then I'm like, wait, wrong channel.
Oh, no.
Just some random person.
Yeah.
And that person is welcome.
Yes, you're welcome.
So Nick's question asking how to keep factions organized when you're building worlds. I don't know what's with the hand motion. Would you recommend kind of faction sheets or some sort of system that makes running factions not just easier for the GM to keep everything in mind, but also the players to realize who's who and who wants what?
So this is, okay, I'm about to bring up something that was... it is simultaneously a bit of a deep cut for my channel, but also something that was bizarrely popular, but kind of controversial, because it's something I learned in my ancient history class when I was in high school, that was to help us structure essays. And I call it the SPERM principle. SPERM, in this case, is an acronym. It stands for social, political, economic, religious, and military. And this is my basis for any kind of faction design at any point. So if I'm designing a city, I look for, okay, what's the group that is going to represent the social sort of aspect of this city? What's the social aspect? Is it based around theater? Is it based around the tavern? Is it based around, and then there's, okay, what's the economic heart? Okay, is there a fisherman's guild? I don't know, that sort of a thing. And I try to fill out, and you don't have to give each one equal weight or importance. You might be like, okay, well, this city is based on Sparta, so military and religious might be the two big ones, and the other ones can kind of fall to the wayside. But it is kind of the basis on which I structure cities, factions, things like that. And then within the faction, I will try to kind of reflect that same cycle again of the social, political, economic, religious, and military. Some people get so shy, they call it the MERPS principle, which I think is silly. Just sperm is a word, use it. But there are a lot of people as well who advocate for adding magic, adding an extra M to the end. I don't do that because I think if you're running a magical setting, that magic should have a place in each of those sort of factors. The only other thing beyond that, I like to, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a short-term thing, but in terms of my campaigns, I'm currently obsessed with the seasons. And so if it's going to be like a long-term thing, I tend to make a calendar, like a seasonal calendar, where I'm like, okay, what's the thing that's going to happen in each season? And then I do the same thing for any major factions or organizations that are at play in the world as well. I'm like, okay, assuming the players don't interfere, what's the thing that this faction is going to achieve in the summer? Those are ways. So I keep a calendar and sperm.
Just reminded of that community episode suddenly.
Someone clip that out of context.
Oh, it will be.
It will be.
The question for me about factions is, having them can be great. Do the players care? Do the players care about the factions that you're introducing? And if they don't, then keeping track of them is kind of a moot point unless they are somehow going to be brought in front of the players to make them care. What I like to do with factions for the players that will care about them is can the players join them? And if so, now you have a direct way to keep track of them, which is how well are the players that are in that faction accomplishing their goals. If they're not something that the players are a part of, but you still want to keep track, have a number system, and it could be anything. It could be 1 to 5, and they start out at a 3. What does moving to a 2, which is, we'll say, better? 1 is the best the faction can be. But if it achieves their goals, so as the players do things or fail to do things, it moves this scale for the faction from a 3 to a 2 or a 3 to a 4. And what do you show the players then to show that? This faction that you've ignored, they've asked for your help, you've ignored them. Now the orphanages in the city have closed and there are all sorts of horrible things happening. That's because of you. They need to understand that's because of them. And that's a way to keep track of that. So have a number and then have a consequence for how it plays out in your campaign. If you can do that, you're probably getting your characters, if not invested, at least aware of the faction and what it means and what they have done to it through their action or inaction. And sperm.
And sperm. Also sperm.
Dungeons of Drakkenheim has a relatively good advice on this because it has a lot of factions in it. It's a fairly faction-heavy campaign. And I believe that advice, if I'm not making this up, although I would run it the same way, so maybe I'm making it up, is to kind of treat factions like an NPC that can do multiple things because that NPC has multiple kind of members of it. Generally, I tend to, when I create a faction, create a more fleshed out leader of that faction and then like a more fleshed out lieutenant of that faction who is generally the one the party will interact with more until they've, either really upset the faction or really helped them. And that's kind of it. I don't, you don't need to give names to every you don't even need 5 members of a faction to make it a faction. Otherwise players do start to become confused as to who's who and what faction they're from and why they're doing that and what's going on and that sort of thing. It also, defining factions can be weird as well, right? Because, is your villain and what they're doing off screen, because I'm often a proponent of role-playing your villain off screen between sessions, making them react to the players and deciding, okay, what is the world state going to be the next time we play because the players accomplished this in the last session? How is the villain reacting to that off screen? I run factions kind of similarly sometimes as well. Less individual names and probably try not to overdo it with the number of factions either.
Yeah, Roman in chat says start with 3 factions: neutral, ally, enemy. As someone who has had too many factions, you can always add more later if you want to.
We literally recorded this also earlier on Mastering Dungeons. This is so weird. This is like
wow, we're
maybe you're a time traveler, Shawn. Yeah.
I feel like it.
Well, I don't have anything to add, but I'm taking all this in because I'm currently about to start running a 2 warring crime families in Waterdeep arc for my party, and I'm really bad at managing politics and factions. So this is great advice. Thank you. Just for me personally.
Luna, because I know you've got a hard out, before we jump into the next question, I will let you dart off. So I very much appreciate you dropping in, filling in for James this week. Where can folks find you if they want to follow your YouTube channel, see you on Twitch, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere on the internet at Lubuffin. If you're watching live, here's my name in the way of typing it in the chat. I normally stream a couple of times a week. I just started a honors run of Baldur's Gate yesterday and I almost died, and it was the most stressful 20 minutes of my life. Dael was there.
Yeah, I just watched you antagonize a bunch of tieflings. So
look, sometimes you make silly choices in life.
No, I get it. Privacy doesn't exist to Luna. No, I got that. That's
Well, no, to Jester. I'm playing as Jester Lavore. Privacy definitely does not exist to Jester Lavore. But yeah, so everywhere on the internet at Lubuffin, I do also make some YouTube videos and things. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just around. I always have such a great time here. So thank you for having me. Like, it's in my favorite guest spot ever to do. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining. We really appreciate it.
We love having you.
Bye.
Out of here. See you, Luna. And then we all might have moved across in our frames because Luna's disappeared. So
get wrecked, Dante.
I checked with him first, so it's okay.
We can't be controlled.
Shawn's question being updated Dungeons and Dragons lore. Does D&D lore need an update/refresh? Even longtime players struggle to name characters from the kind of established D&D lore from Faerun, Forgotten Realms, or whether they're plane hopping kind of adventurers. And even then, if you can name a few, there's very little emotional connection to them or very little detail that you can give about them. And I kind of agree with this. Like, I can name, Tasha, I can name Saz Tam because of the movie, basically. I can name a Serarak, Vecna, more villains than I can like good guys. And so
I straight up, okay. Sorry, you mentioned a Serarak. I, on Twitter at some point, was like, who's a Serarak? And Colville was like, he's on the cover of a book you've looked at 1,000 times. Little did Colville know, I don't even own the DMG, but once it was pointed out to me who it was, I was like, I've got a sticker of that guy on my laptop. I just assumed that was Vecna, but I guess now that I'm paying attention, he's not missing his left eye. So that actually does check out. And then it even developed further because I had thought Xanathar was a guy. I thought he was just a guy.
Right.
I probably was combining in some ways Xanathar with Volo. And then discovering that Xanathar was a beholder was a very shocking moment for me. So, even when you can recognize some of the names floating around, it doesn't mean that you know the lore.
I thought that the cover of the DMG was Lich Guy. Like, I didn't realize that was a character because it's the giant on the cover of the player's handbooker, dude.
Very true.
And I was running Tomb of Annihilation, and I knew that it was a Serarak on the cover of Tomb of Annihilation, and I still didn't draw the conclusion that was also Mr. DMG. There's definitely an issue here, which is kind of harkens back to what we were saying. I think it was last week when we were talking about the TV show or the movie with the Dragonlance TV show. Maybe it was the week before. And it was kind of like, well, what world do they set things in? Because D&D isn't really a world with stories in it, or at least not well-known ones. Or it's not really a world with a canon, you know what I mean? Like Star Wars has a canon. If you're playing in the Star Wars role-playing game, you're probably playing around the edges of the established story. Whereas D&D is a world to facilitate storytelling, which makes it, by definition, difficult to have established characters that you have emotional connections to. Sorry, I want to get that out, but Shawn, you look like you wanted to say something.
No, you've said it all. Right? This is a role-playing game. It's not a movie. It's not a TV show. It's not a novel. It's a role-playing game in which you are the main character. You are the hero. So you don't need other heroes to look up to. In fact, if you do have other heroes to look up to, if an adventure introduces that hero over there, everyone gets upset. Though this is our story. We don't want Elminster, Drist, you name it, coming into my story and solving everything for me. If I wanted that, I would play a video game or I would read a book. I want this to be about my character. And it's absolutely correct.
I think it's reflected as well in things like, Baldur's Gate 3 in the movie. You see these, they invent new heroes. We're not jumping in with established heroes. We're inventing new heroes who it's their story, it's their time to shine. They have to come into the light and do this good thing. The characters that do get to make sort of little cameo appearances and be exciting are the villains. Because of that same thing, because it's not them coming in and solving your problems. It's, oh no, we're facing the biggest problem. We're facing Vecna. It's like, oh, okay, so it's allowed to come in and wreck your day because that's something for you to overcome. That's exciting. Versus if, I love Zank. maybe I would be excited for Zenk to show up in my game, but I would also be worried that Zenk would steal my glory.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Zank in particular, because kind of famously behind the scenes, I believe they had said that Zank was originally in the original script meant to be Drizzt, and that, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and that they kind of changed it probably in the scripting phase at some point. I can't remember the reason they gave as to why they decided to change it. And I think it might have been because he was too big a character to kind of step into this cameo role functionally, serve the story in more than a cameo capacity, and then kind of disappear again. It was kind of like, why doesn't he stick around with the rest of the party for the rest of the movie?
Right. I think that was that was like a tongue-in-cheek poke at the DM PC, right? The one that steps in. It was sort of like a wink. We recognize that he is best at everything, virtuous to a fault, won't even swerve around the stone. It was absolutely perfect. And it was.
He's going to 1v5 these immortal bad guys, and then he's going to walk away into the horizon over a rock.
Right. And we old-time gamers, or just gamers in general, recognize that as, that's the DM's, PC who comes in and just does everything and then walks away. It was perfectly done.
Here's a question that's kind of, again, more speculation, and is my editorializing over the top of Shawn's question, which is this a problem for WotC's licensing strategy with D&D when the most recognizable name in the brand is D&D? Whereas if it's Star Wars, you've got Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and more recently, The Mandalorian, who kind of step into these roles where people have emotional connections to those characters. So a Mandalorian Magic the Gathering card is going to have an emotional drive to want to own that card. Whereas with D&D, the only people that really want to connect with these characters are probably like older gamers who remember these characters from when those novels and stories were relevant back in second edition or whatever, Even Xanathar, they don't really, in his own book, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, they don't really flesh out Xanathar. He just kind of comments, gives glib kind of moments.
I don't think it's necessarily a problem for them. There are different avenues you can take, right? I think it becomes a problem if they want to run with the recognizable characters off of whom we can make bank. But you can trademark all sorts of things. I'm actually surprised that they haven't lent more heavily into toys based on monsters. I'm genuinely surprised that there aren't, a million variations of owlbear plushies. There was a thing I was reading online the other day where someone made a really good point about brands where they can stand, their toys can stand separately from their sort of parent media, right? So Pokemon was the great example, because there is a card game, there is the video games, there is the TV show, there are the toys. But any kid can love their Bulbasaur toy without even watching the show, without knowing about the game. Someone can play the card game and never watch the TV show.
Sure.
You can independently love any sort of branch of that thing. A toy is a medium of its own. And so you could, there definitely is room for Wizards of the Coast to sort of embrace other branches of media without it having to literally be story-based, character-based.
We talked about before, here's role-playing games, here's the industry, and sometimes they cross, sometimes they don't. That has always been the case, believe it or not. Back when the Dragonlance books were coming out, did some people play D&D and love the Dragonlance books? Yes. But I saw more than not, there were the people who read the Dragonlance books, loved them, couldn't care less about the game. There were the people that played the game that despised the Dragonlance books because they were in their eyes, a corruption of the game, right? They weren't D&D, but they pretended to be. And that has been going on since the game started in one way or another. So when you say if they could have made money off owlbear plushies, it's not like Hasbro doesn't know how to make toys, right? They would have been doing that. I don't think there's a market for it because I don't think D&D players are going to go buy the owlbear plushie because they're, at least in my experience up to a point, they're not going to go buy the owlbear plushie because that's just kitschy.
What?
And the people
that's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the people who but would buy the owlbear plushie have 27 other things that are cute and cuddly and interesting, and they don't know that that's an owlbear. They know it's this weird thing that maybe has feathers and a beak, but is it? Well, but look over there. There's Han Solo, or there's whatever. I'm going there. So I think it's the worst of both worlds when you're dealing with the audience that role-playing games bring. Sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say is I genuinely am just very interested in it at the moment. So the thing that comes to mind is that currently an extremely popular toy is Huggy Wuggy, which is from an indie horror game that people play on stream or on YouTube or whatever. But separate to that, completely separate to that, it's just become a really popular toy that kids love. I was driving the other day and I saw a dad with 2 kids, and each of those kids was holding a Huggy Wuggy in each hand. That's a lot of Huggy Wuggies for one household. 4 Huggy Wuggies.
If they have 2 kids and each kid has a Huggy Wuggy in each hand, how many Huggy Wuggies do you have?
This is a tabletop role-playing game?
No, an indie video game, an indie horror video game.
This is the exact thing we would have sold out of EV games.
But the interesting thing is that the attachment seems to be not at all to the actual indie game itself. It seems to have kind of developed a life of its own where maybe some parents got the Huggy. They're like, oh, there's a Huggy Wuggy toy. I'll get that for my kid because that's funny. And then other kids see it and they go, I want that thing. It's a kind of a phenomenon, all of it. It's all of its own. And it makes me think as well of the fact that there's a big factor when it comes to toys where it's like, yes, there is the aspect that is, what does the kid want? What is the kid interested in? But a lot of what it comes down to with toys is what are the adults in their lives going to buy for them? And that's where something like Star Wars, a parent who loves Star Wars is going to buy a Star Wars thing for their kid, no matter what. It doesn't matter if the kid has not seen Star Wars yet.
I think to slightly disagree, I think the step that you might be missing there, Dael, is because I thought this about Pokemon as well, when you were like, a kid can love their Bulbasaur without loving the TV show. But I don't think it's the TV show that's the core of the Pokemon brand. It's the video game, right?
But that's because you came from the video game. For a lot of people, they watched that show, they never played the games.
Sure, and I'm sure that's true. But I think for Huggy Wuggy as well, there's a video game there. But even if the kid hasn't played the video game, video games tend, especially indie horror games like that, tend to invade YouTube and Twitch culture in a way that I think young kids would access and then kind of fall in love with that thing, even if they've never touched the game.
I agree with the core of what you're saying, and I think that's the heart of what this discussion was online, was that kids have access to this YouTube culture that plays this game a lot. But I'm not entirely convinced of the demographic of those Let's Plays being kids of this age. So I think there's absolutely room for it, but I'm not ready to leap on board and go, oh, well, that's the explanation. Because
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. A Huggy Wuggy plushie is the exact sort of thing we would have sold out of EB back in the day when we got, plushies of or toys, action figures of Five Nights at Freddy's and stuff like that would come in. We got, is it Ink Boy? I don't even know. I sound so old suddenly. Who we got a bunch of toys that just completely didn't sell, which I thought was hilarious.
Rakio in chat says, I gave my daughter a Cthulhu doll years before she could even access horror stories. She just thought it was cute.
Okay, there you go. Fair enough.
Right. And you knew it was Cthulhu, which also makes a difference. Because you were engaged enough in the community to know, okay, that's what that is. It's weird looking, but I know what it is, and you think it's cute. And together, we come together to make that purchase. If you hadn't known what it was, and a child was like, "Oh, look at that!" If it wasn't clear to you what it was, there might have been, not with everybody, but might have been a hesitation. But since you knew what it was, everybody comes together, and it's great.
Sure.
And in some ways, it's just scale, right? It's just scale. This many people watch or play video games. This many people watch television shows. This many people play role-playing games. The scale is always going to be in favor of selling what's most out there, what's most available and recognized.
And you know what? There is a whole segment of the industry that does particularly target D&D players who are parents. Like we were just talking about how everyone we know is now having kids and there are babies at the table. We were just talking about that. But I think that the successful branch of that right now are the ones who, you sell the little baby jumpsuits that say, I don't know, my dad's a rogue, or those kind of slightly trashy, slightly cute baby clothes. That it really says more about the parents. You're using your baby as a billboard to express your personality. That sounded very critical, but I do not mean that as a criticism. That's fine.
Baby's like your play character,
Yeah, but it is also I think I haven't thought about this deeply, so I don't know if I'll stand by it for much longer than saying it. But I wonder whether the 80s changed toys. I don't know whether I've seen toys that aren't connected to some other property, and it's sometimes the toy is an idea, and so then we'll make a show to sell the toy. Sometimes there's a show and we'll sell the toy that is connected to the show. But there's always this kind of interconnected family of products that are selling each other, much like Candela Obscura. but you think back, there was a time when people would just be like, I don't know, I made a tiny woman and we'll sell that.
Good old Polly Pocket.
Well, okay, I'll make it even smaller.
Yeah, a tiny woman. That's where I went.
A teeny tiny woman. Did Polly Pocket not have a TV show? I just always assumed she did, but maybe
I know
not.
Mighty Max did, but I think, again, those were toys before.
I miss Mighty Max.
Sorry, Hasbro. We keep talking about Mattel toys. Those were...
Hasbro should do better then.
Yeah, I think the one toy company that's probably slightly immune to that is Lego. I know they do a lot of licensing brands now, but I also think Lego can get away with being like, it's a house. I don't know. It's an emergency car.
I would love to see numbers on how their generic sets sell compared,
yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that folks have brought up a couple of times in the chat, I apologize, I didn't note these comments down, but the more recent opportunity that D&D potentially has for creating characters that folks broadly have an emotional attachment to is the party members from Baldur's Gate. Could they sell, a Karlach action figure, a Karlach statue, or a Karlach plushie or an Astarion plushie or that sort of thing? Because I think more than just the video game, I think Baldur's Gate has probably invaded kind of the streamer space in a way that people who have never played the game might have attachments to those characters because they've watched every version of Astarion's story, through to the end. The interesting question there for me is, who owns Karlach as a character? She's a tiefling, or is she a tiefling or is she a half demon? I'm not quite sure, but she's a D&D thing that Wizards licensed. But the specific character is probably owned by Larian, I would assume. So it would be a complex kind of licensing deal. I don't know. That just fascinated me, the thought of it.
It feels like it crosses over into the realm of collector's items more than toys.
Sure.
Which, I mean, is a totally valid, like its whole own industry. But it is, I sit here and I think, I wouldn't buy a Karlach toy. I love Karlach. I wouldn't buy a Karlach toy. So why is that? And I think it's just because I'm not a collector,
Sure, yeah.
I wouldn't buy it for a friend's kid, and I wouldn't buy it for me. That felt so bam. I'm just pondering, that's all.
You know what else, though, is I wonder, with the D&D characters, there's a separation. The reason you buy a kid a Captain America shield, the reason you buy them Iron Man gauntlets or Hulk fists or whatever, a Thor hammer, is because that kid wants to become that character. whereas D&D kind of actively encourages you not to become Elminster or Volo, it encourages you to create your own character. And so the paraphernalia of Volo or whoever just isn't as interesting to a child. You know, separate from the fact that Captain America is an infinitely more popular, more renowned character.
For sure.
Anyway, with that out of the way, speaking of things that need to finish up, this podcast definitely does. So we are going to jettison out of here. If you have enjoyed listening, you can join us on Twitch at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/ghostfire_. Oh my God, I'm just going to start this again. Dante, you can do a little snip. Speaking of ending things, we're going to end this podcast right now before we wear out our welcome. If you want to join us on Twitch, you can at twitch.tv/ghostfire_official, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on a Monday or Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Time. Or you can find us on YouTube, subscribes, all the YouTube pleasantries, or any other audio platform. If you want to give us a star rating, help us grow and get out to more folks out there, this preeminent source of Dael's tabletop RPG news. Dael needs to know the news. Only you can help keep the Lorecast alive. My name's been Ben Byrne, here with Shawn Merman, Dael Kingsmill, joined today by Luna LeBoffin. Thank you so much, Luna, for joining us, and we will catch you all again next week for another episode. The Eldritch Lorecast. The end.
I can't get that high. No way.
You do the bass.
That's our new outro.
It's just like an elven choir.
Yeah. No, we've gone a sophisticated horror movie. I died in a horrible way. That's an Eddie Izzard bit. Just to throw that out there.